What is up, plant people? It's Tuesday again, and that means it's time once more for the Planthropology Podcast, the show where we dive into the lives, careers, and general amazingness of some very cool plant people. I'm Vikram Baliga, your host and your humble guide, and as always, I am just so excited to be with you today. This is a good one, my friends. It's such a good one, and I'm excited. This is with an old friend of the show and probably someone that a lot of you listen to on the regular in your podcast rotation. We'll get to that in just a second. So, March is a big month in the world of planthropology. From really amazing guests and some really cool content that I think you're going to love. I've, obviously been present at these recordings and have listened back through them. And you're going to love it. You're going to love it. It's going to be such a great month. Also, I am so excited to announce a brand new partnership with a great nonprofit organization called Forest Proud. Forest Proud is a nonprofit organization supporting forest climate solutions in a lot of different ways. It's something we've been trying to get done for a few months now, and I'm so excited that it finally worked out. They're going to be a great partner for the show. I love the mission. I love everything that they do and the way that they approach climate solutions and science and communication and everything else. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the mid-roll, but if you're on your phone or on your computer, go ahead and look up at Forest Proud pretty much anywhere on social media, and you can start taking a look at them. Because this is such a big month, ripe with great guests, new partnerships, and a lot of very soon coming milestones for this podcast, which are really exciting to me. They're probably more exciting to me than they are to you, but we're about to hit some big things, and I don't want to, jinx it, spoil it, or whatever, but I'll talk about it when we get there. But in terms of listenership and the number of downloads and just big milestones on the number of episodes released, just really cool stuff. I would love for you to tell your friends about Planthropology. Go catch up on old episodes if you've sort of been working your way through the back catalog. March could be the month of Planthropology for you, and it is for me. Most months are the month of Planthropology for me, but spring is starting. There's a lot of new beginnings and a lot of cool stuff happening. So if you've been thinking about getting caught up on the show or telling a friend about Planthropology, I would love if you did it this month. This is March 2022 if you're listening to this in the future time. And, if you're listening to this in the future time, go ahead and catch up on the back catalog. There may be, 5,000 episodes by now. That's probably not going to happen, but it may be a ways in the future. You could still tell a friend, you can still support the show, do all the things. But today's episode, again, is one that I'm really, really excited about. If you have been a longtime listener of the show, or if you follow on social media, you will probably know Ellen Weatherford, the host of the Just the Zoo of Us podcast, and really, truly one of my favorite people on the planet. We've become such close friends over the past couple of years. I always just cherish getting to talk to Ellen, and we like to laugh together and talk about fun stuff. So we've been trying to figure out how to collaborate more and again. And I think really Ellen came up with the idea that, wait, what if we talked about plant Pokemon with the release of the new game Legends of Arceus that has just come out as we record this not too long ago. And people are still, I think, trying to beat or have just beaten or whatever. I am very much not very far into the game, but we're going to talk about different plant Pokemon, their origins, and some of the real life plants that relate to them. Doesn't that sound fun? I think it does. It's going to be a good time. So y'all buckle up, grab a nice bunch of face bananas, and get ready for episode 74 of Planthropology, grass-type Pokemon, and the real life plants that inspired them. Then with my friend, Ellen Weatherford. All right. Well, we're back again. It keeps happening. I don't know. It's weird. And I'm here again with Ellen Weatherford, who is one of my favorite humans on the planet. How are you, Ellen?
I'm great. That's right, folks. OG listeners of Planthropology will remember almost exactly 2 years ago when I was here. So you guys cannot get rid of me. I'm so sorry. It's an infestation at this point.
So that was episode like 10, which was funny because at the time I remember thinking like clearly, oh my gosh, 10 episodes is a lot. I've done 10 of these.
Even
And
10 is a milestone. You know,
it
they
was.
isn't that a thing where like they say the vast majority of podcasts don't make it to 10 episodes?
I think that's right. 10 or 15 or something like that. Like they don't last a long time. So now here we are, and this is episode
A billion.
I don't actually know, 70 something, maybe 80. And we're back again. And we were talking a little bit about, how we could work together again. And I got to be on Ellen's podcast, Just the Zoo of Us, not too long ago. It was over the summer, I guess. And I've been wanting to have her back on for a while. And the new Pokemon game just came out.
Mhm.
And I thought, or we thought, I guess we talked about it together. And we're
This
trying to
was
come
a
up with something.
brainstorming session.
And Ellen's probably more of the authority on Pokemon than I am. I keep hitting my desk too. So if you hear weird noises in the background, it's just I can't sit still.
Relatable.
And so we're going to talk about grass type Pokemon and their real life counterparts. But before we get into it too much, and get through the episode, Ellen, do you want to tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you do on your show?
Yeah, thank you so much. So ours is Just the Zoo of Us. It's about animals, which you may be kind of scratching your head like, why was Vikram on a podcast talking about animals? But we broke form. We did. We diverged from our typical path to talk about plants, which was really fun. It was really cool.
Fun.
I feel like it was really not that much of a divergence. Plants actually fit into our typical format pretty well, in which we rate animals out of 10 for their physical adaptations, their behavioral strategic ability, I suppose, and their aesthetics, such as how pretty they are and nice they are to look at. So as you can imagine, plants actually fit pretty well into those categories. It was a pretty seamless transition.
And we got to talk about some insects and some of the weird relationships between animals and insects and animals and plants and specific insects and plants. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, there are some really interesting intersections between plant and animal. Sometimes we talk about like animals on the show that I feel like are really kind of blurring that line between plant and animal. You know, like humans have a tendency to want to put everything into very defined categories. And then sometimes you come across something like, for me, it was like a sponge, where it's like, you're like, this one could go either way.
Yeah. And then like, I don't know if have y'all done algae? That's maybe not like
really.
It's not really an animal, but it's not really a plant either.
So that's the thing. So I messaged you in distress recently. I was stressed out because I learned that algae is not like technically really a plant, and I was in full blown meltdown panic mode because I have gone around this whole time thinking algae was just plants, but it's not. Turns out
it's kind of its own thing. And I do remember getting a few like caps lock messages like, oh no,
what do I do?
I'm having a crisis. But that actually leads us pretty well into our episode for today, or our topic for today, because in the world of Pokemon, okay, wait, let me put a pin in this real quick. Is it Pokemon or Pokemon?
Okay,
because
so
you hear it both ways.
So I guess if you wanted to be like super authentic about it, it's Pokemon.
Oh.
The E with a little accent over it is Pokemon. And sometimes like if you're watching like commercials and stuff, because they have to like adhere to brand guidelines and stuff, you'll hear like announcers will very much enunciate that Pokemon, and everyone always laughs because that sounds so goofy. That's just not how we naturally pronounce it in English. But I mean, you know, it comes from Japanese, and that is very much how they say it. Most English speakers just say Pokemon. Okay. It sounds goofy to say it any other way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I don't know, growing up, I think I said it different ways, and I watched the cartoon a lot. Like I said, I was gonna say as a kid, I probably wasn't as young as I think I was in my head, but I watched it anyway.
Well, I watched it as a kid too, and I fell off watching the cartoon probably like Hoenn, like in like the third generation.
Hmm.
I really focused on the games after that. So I could not tell you a whole lot about the cartoon. Unfortunately, I'm not plugged into that scene.
Oh, that's okay. I have no, yeah, I'm not. I'm certainly not anymore either. And we tried to get my son to watch it one time, and we got like 20 minutes in, and he was like,
Mhm.
"Eh." Like, okay,
It requires a lot of background knowledge, I
yeah,
think, because a lot of it is like assuming that you kind of already know a lot about Pokemon. But my kid likes it. My 7-year-old likes it. He likes to watch the movies.
okay,
Yeah, the movies are so goofy and cheesy. But I will say, Detective Pikachu was a pretty cute little movie.
okay. See, I haven't seen that, and I
It's
really
cute.
would like to. Okay, we may have to try again then, because Bradley's 6 now, and we try. It's funny because we tried playing, um, not the most recent one. What was the one before that?
Was it the Diamond and Pearl remakes?
Yes, yes, and we got into it, and he enjoyed it, like, he enjoyed the gameplay, but we
Hmm.
were like, "There's a lot of reading, and you
Yeah.
can't read." So that was a problem.
Well, I will say, because you say that, Bradley cannot read, but he wants to play Pokemon. That's how I learned to read.
Oh, okay.
So, and that's kind of how my son got really, really good at reading, was that he kind of already had, like, he could spell things out and it would kind of take him a while to read, but he kind of had the basics. And then over the summer of 2020, right, where we didn't have
Mhm.
anything else to do, and I was being
Mhm.
extremely lenient with our screen time restrictions, in that there were basically none,
Right.
basically letting him, play video games all day long, and he really got into Pokemon Sword and Shield. And he played it so much. And you're right, there's a lot of reading in this
Like, a
game.
lot.
There's no voice acting. So if
No.
you want to progress at all in the story, you have to read all of the dialogue. Um, he played it so much that he started reading faster and faster and faster and got really good at it. And that's kind of where I was when I was 5 years old. And I would have been four, when my grandmother got me a purple transparent Game Boy Color.
Oh, man.
Yeah, with Pokemon Gold version, and gave it to me. I started playing, immediately was like, I cannot read at the level that it is required to
Mhm.
progress in this game. So I was completely just pressing random buttons and like hoping something worked. But eventually, because I was really motivated to play this game and like experience what the game was about and get better at it, I kind of picked up things and started to get better and better at it. And through playing so much Pokemon as a kid, I got much faster at reading. And so I feel like since I had that experience of learning to read through playing Pokemon, that helped me be a little more open to the experience for my
Sure.
son. Be like, hey, it worked for me. All right, play Pokemon and learn to read.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, again, that's another thing we'll have to give another try, because it's been a little while, and
Hmm.
Bradley's 6 now, and he's probably old enough to get into that. He can read a little bit now.
Yeah.
Uh, it which makes it a lot harder. This is an aside, but I taught him how the speedometer in my truck works.
Oh,
So, which was a mistake, by
is
the
he
way.
calling you out now?
Oh my goodness.
You got a
Like,
little lawful good
yeah, he's
gremlin
like
in
the
your car.
backseat police. I swear. He just sits there and he's like, "Daddy, that sign said speed limit 45. So you can't go over the little mark that says 45." And I'll be on like 50. And he's like, "Daddy, the police are going to chase you." It's like,
Oh no.
okay, okay.
I get it.
So
I've
yeah,
been
there
there.
mistakes were made. Anyway, so you've been into it for a long time. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, for most of your life,
pretty
right?
much my whole life. Yeah.
I remember, and I'm a few years older than you, but I got Pokemon, I think Blue, on the original Game Boy. That
Not the
was
color.
no, oh no, the old one that, like, there was no backlit screen. You had to get the little, like, magnifier thing that went on top of it if you
With the
wanted
light
to.
on the back
Uh
so you
huh.
could play it in the car at night
That's exactly it. Instead of
or
having to
under your
like wait
covers.
wait for a street light to like move a little bit.
That's
Um.
a formative experience, though. I feel like that's like a uniting experience for like an entire generation of like
Oh yeah.
trying to play your Game Boy under streetlights.
Oh yeah. Oh no. It's really true. And like, they took 47 AA batteries, and it was the size of a laptop. But no, that was a big part of my childhood too. And it was, I don't know. It's weird to say it like taught me a lot, but it kind of did. Not just
Mhm.
reading, but just about. I don't know, because we were getting into this time where video games were getting more popular, it was really becoming a thing uh, in the early, I mean, for me, it was the early 90s. And um, I don't know, it was, again, very formative because now everything is computers and everything is handheld. So I feel like as a kid, I had that experience that maybe even people 10 years older than me maybe not have had.
It helps to build your like sort of digital literacy almost, like helps you learn how to like navigate a digital space and like something I think about sometimes is like video game literacy. So
Uh-huh.
like if you handed someone a video game and they'd never touched one ever in their lives, how quickly could they pick up on it?
Yeah.
So I feel like it was a really good kind of stepping stone into learning how to like navigate even though it was only, essentially 2D at the time, like learning how to like navigate your little avatar in a digital space is really, really useful for that.
And at the time, it was almost like you had to learn to deal with like frustration. And because
Hmm.
for those of you out there listening, if you've never played like the original 2 or 3 Pokemon games,
So
like
hard.
red, blue, yellow, gold, whatever, like it was not, oh, I'm going to play this, I'm going to win. It's like, I'm going to lose a bunch and I'm going to cry a bunch. And then eventually, like my little friends, and it's always a funny thing because like the whole premise is I'm going to walk around in these woods, and I'm going to find this kid and I'm going to beat up his pets.
I'm
And
going to harass wildlife.
and fight children and take their money
Oh
because it
yeah.
was like the little bug catcher kids in the first like part of the game, they're like they look like they're 4 years old.
Yeah. I think that the whole Pokemon franchise has done a lot of like trying really hard to make the premise of the entire franchise hold up to like modern ethical standards where we're not just like running around harassing wild animals and it's like uh, you can feel in some of the more recent games, you can feel them kind of grappling with that like within the game itself because some of it's sketchy at best. But
Like it's like 7-year-old pet fight club.
right.
And
Yeah, it's a little rough sometimes.
but this is actually a great time to be talking about this because the new game just came out. It was what,
Mm.
Legends of Arceus?
Legends
Arceus?
Arceus.
Arceus.
Arceus, it's another one of those things where everyone like the official materials call it Arceus, but everybody who's been playing Pokemon since 4th gen originally came out, 15 years ago, we all say Arceus and we've said Arceus this whole time and it's a
That's what I
tough
had in my
habit to
head.
break. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough to break.
And I haven't gotten real far into it, but it's a lot of fun. The whole mechanics are very different than any
Hmm.
other like Pokemon game I've played. But I picked and I haven't played it even enough to remember all the names, but I obviously picked the plant owl. Uh
Rowlet.
Rowlet, there you go.
Yeah.
And because I have to stay on brand, right? I can't. And as much as I want the little fire or whatever it was, again, I've played like 3 hours, and then Bradley's like, "No, I want to play Minecraft." So I don't, it's fine. It's fine. I'm not bitter or anything. So that actually kind of leads us in of let's talk about plant Pokemon. Or
Hmm.
so are they? Here's a real basic question: are they still called grass type, or are they calling them like plant type now?
They're grass type. Some of the Pokemon types are a little bit inscrutable. Like the most recent addition to the lineup has been fairy type. So
Hmm.
it's like, what does that even mean? Like,
Yeah, it's just yeah.
it, but some of it is just vibes purely.
Hmm.
But yeah, so they're grass type, but then usually the Pokedex entry will call it something. It'll call it like I don't know, the tree banana Pokemon, the
Hmm.
flower Pokemon, which is meaningless. It's complete flavor text. It doesn't have any it's like just pure flavor text, right? But they are still called grass types. So I prepared some really cool grass types to specifically look at with you so we could talk about how they tie into the real world plants that inspired the Pokemon's design.
Okay, that sounds great. And I was, yeah, looking over some of your notes, and I'm really excited to talk about these because there's some, and you highlighted some things in here that were like, okay, here's some of the real world examples, and there's some weird stuff that goes along with it. So I'm
Hmm.
sometimes, truth is stranger than fiction in a lot of ways. So there's some weird plant stuff I'll talk about too.
Yeah. So, just kind of jumping right into it, we would be remiss if we didn't begin a conversation about grass type Pokemon with Bulbasaur. Arguably, I mean, it's number one in the Pokedex, in like the national Pokedex that
Yeah.
includes every Pokemon of like a 200,000 Pokemon. Bulbasaur is number one. So Bulbasaur was the grass type starter from Gen 1. It's just a sweet little froggy looking dude and has a big old bulb on its back that has been described as an onion, a garlic. Just kind of has that sort of shape to it. But as it grows, it evolves into Ivysaur. So I should explain, if you're listening to this and you're not really familiar with Pokemon, as a Pokemon grows, it goes through these stages of like metamorphosis where its whole body changes and it takes on new types and new abilities. It can do new things, and that's just like its life cycle. But they call it evolution. They say it evolves when a better word for it would be metamorphosis, but they use the word evolve instead. So Bulbasaur evolves into Ivysaur, where it has this pink flower on its back that's like, what do you call it when a flower is like, it's there but it's not open?
It's like a bud
Yeah.
it's like a flower bud, right?
Yeah, so it's got this big pink flower bud on its back, and then when it evolves into its final form, it's Venusaur, and it has this big, huge, flat, five-petaled pink flower on its back. And it looks a lot like this real-world flower called Rafflesia arnoldi.
It's a good one. And that it's funny because I read some of these names, these like scientific botanical names, and I'm like, who decided we all needed to say that? Because that's a fun one.
Rafflesia, I think, is a killer name. I really like Rafflesia.
Cool. You name a dog that.
I would name a D&D character that.
Oh, that is a good one.
Like a druid?
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. I say that like I know anything about that, but except for starting to listen to the Adventure Zone a little bit.
You're welcome for that.
Oh, by the way, this is a shameless plug for another podcast, and I don't even feel bad. I jumped into Ethersea on the Adventure Zone, which is a Max Fun podcast by the McElroys, and it's so much fun. I did going in, and I keep like texting Ellen questions. I'm like, I don't know what they're doing, what's happening, but the storytelling's great, and it's so much fun.
If you're into marine biology, it's a great storytelling, like fantasy fiction, very fun listen.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you have in your notes here that the aroma from Venusaur is pleasant.
So the Pokedex entry in Crystal version specifically says that it has a pleasant aroma. And then other generations say in the Pokedex entries that the flower's aroma has a soothing effect on both people and Pokemon. So the idea is that this Venusaur's flower creates this very nice, like therapeutic smell. But from what I understand about Rafflesia arnoldi, that does not seem to be the case.
Not so much. They call it the corpse flower. For a reason. It smells like a dead guy. And it grows in a place that bees and butterflies and other pollinators are not real present. So it smells like decomposing animal matter.
Gross.
Because it's pollinated by flies.
Oh.
And flies like dead stuff, and so they feed on they're saprophytes, saprivores, so they feed on like decaying plant material, animal material, and even the color. Like if you look at it, it's sort of like a red brown, and it's sort of gross, but it's this fascinating coevolution with we have to be pollinated by something. The only thing around is a fly. We should smell like a thing that a fly wants to eat.
And look like it too. That is like very all-encompassing mimicry.
and we'll get into this more as we go, but we actually just talked about flower structure in my horticulture class not too long ago as we record this. And I was talking about corpse flowers and all these different things, and just the relationships between plants and their pollinators are really fascinating.
Yeah, because this is like, they're like, we can't go the route of making ourselves pretty and smell nice. So instead, let's make ourselves look and smell like rotting meat,
like
because
rotting meat.
you're playing to your audience. All right. You got to know your
Know
audience.
your audience. And I also want to point out that this is a huge flower. Like
Mm,
they are anywhere between 3 and 5 feet in diameter sometimes. So
huge.
they're huge.
Have you ever seen one in person?
I have not. I have seen similar like species of succulents and some of these tropical plants. I've never gotten to see one in person, but I would like to.
Mm. Do they smell like that like all the time, or is it just like a?
It's just the bloom, right? So the
Mm,
plant itself, not so much. But as it blooms and when it's really like pollinating and at full maturity, then it does. Another thing that's interesting about corpse flowers is they produce their own heat.
oh wow.
So flies and a lot of other carrion insects actually look for heat sources as they're looking for decaying animal material or
Hmm.
meat. So to mimic that, not only does it look like that and smell like that, it's actually usually warmer than the ambient air temperature because
Mm.
it wants to, like in that infrared spectrum, still attract insects in another way.
That's so cool. Just not too long ago, we talked about on our podcast, we talked about vulture bees.
Hmm.
Bees that, they don't pollinate flowers. They don't, use uh is it the nectar? They don't use nectar to
Hmm.
make honey. But they do eat dead and decaying meat.
Yeah,
So I wonder, I don't quite remember off the top of my head where the vulture bees live. I think it's in South America,
I think that's right.
but I wonder if there's some overlap between their ranges.
There might be. I'm not
That's
sure. That'd be a really
cool.
confused bee. Like, wait, what's happening?
Oh, I've been duped.
This was not an antelope. I don't know where antelope live. I'm a plant guy.
Not there.
Okay, great, perfect. This is going real well.
Well, I should also say before we move on from Venusaur and the corpse flower, there is within the same generation of Pokemon, within the same 150, there is another Pokemon also based on the same flower, and that is Vileplume, which also, I mean, basically looks like Venusaur, but without the big giant toad part.
Hmm.
Like it's
Yeah.
got the big corpse lily flower, but then the bottom of it is just like this little like black, like kind of amorphous almost body.
Hmm.
So I'm curious to know why they decided to do two corpse flower Pokemon like straight out the gate, right? Like this
Just
was
right off the bat.
the first batch of Pokemon, and they're like, we need two of these.
And I feel like Oddish is really pretty early in your Pokedex too. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly, but yeah,
It's
they're
like right
just
in that first little forest area.
if you've got good source material, just if it ain't broke, just why fix it, right?
True, they're
And
really
and
leaning into it.
and I would say that almost the flower on a Vileplume looks even more like the Rafflesia than the Venusaur does. But
Hmm. I feel like they were really focusing on that one more.
yeah, I think so.
So, also within the first generation of Pokemon games, there was Tangela, which I always like hesitate to say the name Tangela out loud because I'm pretty sure the Pokemon's name is pronounced Tangela, but I have met in real life a woman named Tangela,
Huh.
Angela with a T on the
Uh-huh.
beginning, and now every time I see it, I'm like, am I supposed to say Tangela?
Which
I
one
don't
is
think I
it?
am.
It's got to be
I'm
one of them.
pretty sure it's Tangela because it's supposed to be like tangled because the Pokemon looks like this little mass of just knotted, tangled vines.
Hmm.
So this Pokemon was probably based on sargassum seaweed,
Hmm.
where it like washes up on beaches in clumps, and then this has inspired a lot of like sea monster like folklore about like seaweed creatures
Yeah.
that come up out of the water, especially in Japan, right, where Pokemon was made. So you can see a lot of like comparisons with seaweed there. But personally, and this is literally just me, I also think Tangela reminds me a lot of tumbleweeds. Um,
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
because it's just a big ball of, tangly plant matter, I get. This
Hmm.
leads me to my question, what is a tumbleweed even? Like I literally don't know what they are.
So they're pretty much just what they sound like. So there's a number of actually genera and species of what we commonly refer to as a tumbleweed. So one of the most common ones, and especially like when you think of like a Western and the tumbleweeds like blowing across the open plains or whatever, which by the way, we have these a lot here in Texas where I live. Like we'll have fence lines covered in these things. Is Calitragus, the Russian thistle. So it's a annual like shrubby, we call it a weed, but it's just a plant.
Mhm.
A weed is just a plant that we don't want around.
It's a perspective thing.
It's a perspective thing, right? And they can get somewhere between 3, 5, sometimes even a little bit taller, like 3 and 5 feet, sometimes even a little bit taller. And essentially this plant grows, it flowers, it goes through its whole life process, but there aren't a lot of animals that will like feed on the seed and spread them around or anything like that. So the adaptation that they have is that they break off at the stem because they typically live in windy open places. They're prairie plants in general. And then they just blow around. And so they as the seed matures and as those flowers dry up, the rest of the plant does too. They break off at the ground and they blow across the plains, and as they roll, they drop seeds. And so
Mm.
their dispersal method is just to roll around for a while. And then eventually seed ends up different places, you get more of them, and then they spread that way.
That's interesting. I like that they have kind of removed animals from the
Hmm.
equation. They're like, well, y'all ain't pollinating us. We'll do it ourselves.
And that's exactly right. And you get some weird adaptations like this, especially in very dry climates where insect and animal populations are pretty directly related to rainfall and seasons and stuff like this. And sometimes the plants are well timed to that. But on a bad year, that plant still has to figure out how to spread seed. Right. And so they're probably largely self pollinated or wind pollinated. So the pollen just blows on other plants. And then, yeah, they break off. They blow across the open plains and drop seeds everywhere they go.
I don't think this is a plant that occurs naturally in Japan.
Probably
Um,
not.
but I mean, that's not to say that, every single Pokemon is only based on things you find in Japan, right? Like we
Sure.
just talked about corpse flowers, that I don't think those occur in Japan either.
I don't think
Um,
so.
so the inspiration was probably more from these like clumps of seaweed that wash up on the beach. I feel like having being familiar with tumbleweeds, I can't look at Tangela and not think that's what that is.
No, I see that for sure. For sure.
There's a little bit of a departure from the source material, but I figured this was a good excuse for me to ask what a tumbleweed is, because it's one
Yeah.
of those things that I just never really figured out. Um,
Yeah.
so another thing that I think Pokemon is really good at is incorporating carnivorous plants into their designs, which people who listen to my podcast will remember you came on and we talked a lot about carnivorous plants. Oh, we talked about carnivorous plants here
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
podcast. So Pokemon loves carnivorous plants. You can see some really cool designs, the first of which is also in Gen 1. So they were really having fun with plants in
They
Gen
were.
1. There's a lot of like the people that design the Pokemon come from ecology like backgrounds. Like a
Oh,
lot of
that's
them
cool.
are like you can tell in some of the ways that some of the mechanics of the game are designed that like somebody was bringing some real world ecology knowledge into this.
Yeah.
um this goes back to like the fact that Satoshi Tajiri, who like created and started Pokemon, was inspired by his childhood spent collecting bugs.
Hmm.
So he spent his whole childhood going out and catching bugs and being like really inspired by real world entomology and stuff. So like you can see that love for nature really come through in the Pokemon designs. So the carnivorous plant Pokemon, starting with Bellsprout, Weepin' Bell, and Victory Bell, which are Pokemon where for Bellsprout, like the whole body is really just kind of this wispy vine, and then the head of it is this big bell shape. And then as it evolves, that bell takes over, kind of really becomes the focal point of the Pokemon. Or by the time it gets to Victory Bell, it's pretty much just the bell. It doesn't even have that body anymore.
Yeah.
But they're very much based on pitcher plants, which we've talked about before. But I, of course, am always happy to talk about pitcher plants because we have them here where I live.
And
I
that's
can
so
go out
cool.
and see them. It's so cool.
They're fascinating. And Yeah, we've talked a couple of times before about the weird relationships and how, like, oh, we may not have great roots or the soil is not great where we live. So we're just going to eat stuff. Why
That's
not?
a different protein investment.
Yep.
So what's really interesting is that, so like in the real world, the pitcher plants, the bugs and its prey kind of falls into it. It's got slippery stuff, so the
Hmm.
bugs fall inside, and then it digests the prey. So the Pokedex entries describe Victory Bell as attracting prey with a sweet honey, which I'm going to assume is something like a sap. Like it's not a bee, but
Yeah, right.
it's like some sort of sweet syrupy sap thing. But something really interesting that was only ever mentioned in the Ruby and Sapphire Pokedex entries say that it flicks the vine on top of its head and
Hmm.
uses it like a lure. So I've seen animals do this, like snapping turtles will have a tongue that they flick around like a lure. There's a snake that has the end of its tail looks like a spider, and it waves
Hmm.
it around to like look like a spider and lure in birds. But I've never heard of a plant using motion like to attract something to it. I've never
That's
heard of
it.
that before.
That's interesting, and they're probably not doing it in an active sort of way.
Mm.
But there are plants that have flowers on long stalks or different kinds of structures on long stalks that'll blow around in the wind. There's a plant called Gara, Gara lindheimeri, I believe is the scientific name. And in the native forms, they call them dancing butterfly because these plants put on these long, thin stalks with little flowers that look a little bit like butterflies. Now, whether that's to actually attract pollinators or not, it may or may not be. I think it's probably just to get the flowers up above the level of the grasses that they grow around. But the motion probably is an attractant in some ways. And more than actual motion, I think coloration and some of the other stuff is how usually plants are attracting their pollinators. And we talked about the corpse flower and the weird stuff it does, but there are plants, some orchids, some other flowers that essentially put like runway lights on like on the flower itself to show the insects where to go. And
This way.
yeah, it's this way. The part you want's in here. And like, and I, there's no way to show a picture on a podcast. I may share some pictures when I share this, but there are plants that have actually UV like coloration because a lot of insects can see in the UV spectrum. So when these pollinators are coming in for a landing or whatever, there are literally patterns on some flowers that lead them into the center of the flower in ultraviolet spectrums. And so just fascinating adaptations.
Secret code.
Yeah, that us big hairless apes can't see. We're just like pretty flower, and the bees are like, no, 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 you're missing it.
There's instructions. They're written right there.
It's like Nicolas Cage is going to go start investigating them soon.
It reminds me of like when you were a kid, they would sell those little markers or pens that would write with like invisible ink
Yeah.
that you could see when you shone a black light over it, and you would like write stupid little notes to your friends like you were on top secret business.
No one will ever know what's on here.
Nobody would care to. Why would they?
No, nobody cares. And that was a funny, like, it was a big deal. Like, oh, this
I
has
can
to be
keep my
secret.
secrets.
My mom can't know. It's like, and your message was just like, hi. Like, there's nothing important.
Never, but it was the dynamic of having some sort of secret information.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so aside from the pitcher plants, there's also Carnivine, which is a Gen 4 Pokemon. I personally think Carnivine is the ugliest Pokemon design ever made.
Oh, now I have
hate
to look it up.
Carnivine. Carnivine is terrible. It's so ugly. And I'm kind of like, oh man, why'd they have to do my Venus flytrap friends like this? Because it
Oh.
does, yeah, no, it's not good.
Oh,
It
no,
looks
that's
so bad.
really unsettling, actually.
Yeah. So
Does
all
it
of
fly?
no,
Can
it doesn't fly.
Oh,
But they're
okay.
quite mean in Pokemon
Oh.
Legends. So if you're listening to this and you haven't played Pokemon Legends Arceus, here's the thing. The Pokemon fight you, and Carnivine is really mean.
I haven't gotten there. That's
So
kind
you're,
of
like,
exciting.
running through this swamp, and there's this giant Venus flytrap monster like chasing you down.
He looks mean.
He's mean. Yeah, he's not a friend. But he's based on a Venus flytrap, and there wasn't a lot to say about this Pokemon because it actually really doesn't come up that much. It's kind of
Hmm.
one of those Pokemon that's like it's there, but nobody uses it. It's not particularly good. It doesn't evolve into or from anything, so it feels like a filler Pokemon to me. Like
Yep.
it doesn't really do a lot. But I did want to say that all of its Pokedex entries do also reference a sweet smelling drool
Ugh.
that it uses to attract prey. I know
That's
this.
even worse.
Nothing about it is good.
Oh
But that's
man.
very similar to Victory Bell, So
Yeah.
both of these Pokedex entries are referencing, the carnivorous plants and the way that they kind of draw in their prey. Is this a thing for Venus flytraps? Did they like use some sort of chemical lure for their prey?
They might to a certain extent. Some of it is also coloration. So they're eating a
Hmm.
lot of flies and stuff like that. And the inside of the pad is sort of a deep red color. So,
Mm,
it probably attracts it like a lot of these carrion flowers do. And they have these little trigger hairs on them. And it's like a bear trap, right? So the two pads are locked open with hydrostatic pressure. They're full of water. And an insect has to touch like a trigger hair on each pad within a certain amount of time, and then it snaps shut. But if
mm.
like the insect's too small and can't hit all of them, it takes a lot of energy to close it and reopen it, and make new pads. So they only want to trigger it when they're going to get enough of a meal. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I almost wish that they had done more with the Venus flytrap concept.
Yeah, it's really
Than
cool.
it is. It's so cool, and I don't know. Carnivine feels a little bit like a letdown. I'm like, oh man, he's ugly and his stats are bad, and nobody uses him. So I wish they had explored especially because the corpse flower got two Pokemon
Yeah,
instantly.
right
Like
away.
we need more for the Venus flytrap friend.
Yeah, maybe the next generation.
Yeah. So I was kind of surprised that those were really the only two carnivorous plant Pokemon that I could find. I kind of wish that there had been like a Sundew like Pokemon
Yeah, those are neat.
yeah, something really cool, but those are the ones I could find. A little bit of a letdown because I feel like they could do a lot with carnivorous plants. So hopefully maybe the next generation, maybe we'll get some more cool carnivorous plants.
Yeah, I hope so too. So this is probably a good place to take a quick break.
Yeah.
I remember to do this sometimes. I usually don't. And usually I'm just listening. I'm like, here's a place where we stop talking. I'll throw them in. But we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. And then we're going to talk about tree Pokemon, flower Pokemon, and then some fake stuff that just got made up.
Fake news.
Well, hey there. Welcome to the mid-roll. Fancy meeting you here again. You doing all right? How's your week going? How are you enjoying the episode so far? Hasn't it been so much fun? I promise that we will slander more Pokemon just as much as we did Carnivine in the second half. I promise. It's great. You're going to love it. So, a few things. First off, have you connected with Planthropology yet? You really should. We're all the places on the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Search for Planthropology. It is anthropology with a PL slapped on the front. And look for the green background with the bristlecone pine. And that's me. And you should follow and connect. You should also join the Planthropology's Cool Plant People Facebook group. It's really wonderful. Lots of fun stuff. Bonuses and new content and stuff directly from the TikTok machine, which, by the way, I am at the Plant Prof on the TikTok machine. You should follow me there too. Information about new episodes, polls, all kinds of things. You should be a part of it. It's a lot of fun. If you'd like to support the show, the easiest way to do it is to tell a friend or to rate and review the show on Podchaser, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you can. I would really appreciate it so much if you would just take a couple of minutes out of your time to go and do that. Now, does it help in the rankings? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Depends who you talk to. But it makes me feel good and gives me the warm fuzzies in my heart places. Also, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/planthropology and make a small donation. It helps keep all of this running and on the air, and I will use it to buy coffee, which keeps me from punching people in the morning and out of prison, which is a nice thing for me. I want to talk more about Forest Proud, our newest partner. They're sponsoring this episode and all episodes for the next 3 months or so, which is really very exciting. And they are a nonprofit whose mission is to build awareness and support for keeping forests as forests to fight climate change. So really, they are just trying to target probably a lot of y'all and me, 18 to 34-year-olds. I'm one of these for the next, 4 months or so. But across the sectors, across different parts of society, to really talk about why forests are important and how we can combat climate change through good forest management. So whether you're an industry professional or just someone listening to this show who wants to learn more about how to save the planet, head over to forestproud.com. Look them up as at forestproud, all the places. Use the hashtag forestproud. They're really very well branded. And if you go on their website and you want to order some swag, use the promo code Planthropology at checkout for a 10% discount on all your gear. Also, thank you so much to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science for supporting this show and making all this possible. Literally could not do it without the support of my university, my department chair, and my college. Okay. The other thing is, at the end of every month, I'll be doing Q&A episodes, so keep sending in questions. I've got a few banked from February, but if you've got more that you want to ask about the show, about the partnerships, about anything else that goes on here at Planthropology, send them my way. I would very much like to cover your topic. And what else? Is there other things? Yeah, there probably are, but I'm just going to skip back to it. So first, you're going to hear a trailer for another great Podfix Network show, which, by the way, thanks to Podfix for letting me be a part of it. But here's a trailer for another great show called Love These Mother-Daughter Talks. It's really a delight. And then we're going to get back to it and talk about face bananas. Okay, here we go.
Ever wonder why your kid won't listen?
Ever wonder why your mom is so bossy?
Well, we do all the time. That's why we created our podcast,
Love These Mother-Daughter Talks with Bryn and Flynn.
Through a series of open and honest conversations, Flynn and I hope to deepen our understanding of each other and help other parents and children deepen their understandings of what goes on in their day-to-day struggles.
And more.
We are officially now on the Podfix Network. Also, find us anywhere you download your podcasts. Hey Flynn, I love these mother-daughter talks.
Me too. Let's see you on our next episode.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed whatever it was that I said to you during the mid-roll. I probably played a trailer.
Hilarious. It was
thank
great.
you.
Gold
Thank
content.
You. I appreciate it. So, tree Pokemon, what's next?
Okay, so right off the bat, let's talk about Exeggutor. We're back in Gen 1. Once again, great generation for plant Pokemon. Exeggutor. Okay, so first of all, Exeggutor evolves from Execute, which is just eggs.
It's just a bunch of eggs.
The design is some eggs.
And half of them are broken? I don't know.
They're pink. They're also psychic for some reason. This Gen 1 was experimental.
What can we get away with? What weird stuff can we put out there?
So Execute is kind of the poster child for when people are complaining about oh, the modern generations have such tired designs. Oh, the new Pokemon designs aren't even good. Execute is always the one people point at as well, look what Gen 1 was working with.
It's just eggs.
It's some eggs. And so inexplicably, some eggs evolve into a coconut tree.
Why not?
I have looked and I cannot find a solid answer for why some eggs turn into a coconut tree. Maybe it's because the eggs kind of look like coconuts almost.
I guess.
It's inexplicable. But so even funnier than the fact that some eggs evolve into a coconut tree that's also psychic for some reason, the Alolan form of Exeggutor. So this is a thing where new generations usually will be in a new region of the Pokemon world, and sometimes in these different regions existing Pokemon will be there, but they look different, or maybe even have different types, right? Some of them will have completely different typing. They'll be essentially a different Pokemon, but it's just a regional form of that Pokemon. The Alolan form of Exeggutor, which the Alolan region was very much based on Polynesian islands. It's Hawaii, very Hawaii inspired. The Alolan form of Exeggutor is just regular Exeggutor. They took its head and just stretched it straight up and just go gadget necked, just stretched it out like bubble gum. And so it has this incredibly, body still same size.
Yeah.
Head still same size.
Just a long neck.
Just a neck that is 10 times the length of the body. And it's also dragon type for some reason. Who knows why? Can't quite figure that one out.
So he's a dragon now.
Yeah. I mean, he also has a tail and but otherwise unchanged. So this one is a a little bit of a conceptual mess. But Executor is literally just a coconut tree. So this led me to think, like, I was really trying to think. I was like, now, is it a coconut tree or is it a palm tree? Because we have a lot of palm trees here. But our palm trees don't grow coconuts on them. So I was like, is it a coconut tree or is it a palm tree? I didn't realize that like coconut trees are just types of palm trees.
Right.
I didn't know this. I don't know anything about the palm tree world, what they've got going on.
It's a little weird, actually. Yeah, they're weird plants.
For sure.
Yeah, so coconut palms are a specific kind of palm, and that's where like, some palm trees we get palm oil from the fruits. We get dates from date palms. We get coconuts from coconut palms, and there's a wide variety of things that we get from palm trees, and they're interesting plants. For a long time, people said they're a tree, and then they're like, no, they're not a tree. They're a big grass.
Okay.
And the truth is somewhere in the middle, actually.
Love it.
So they're not a tree, they're not a grass, but they have characteristics similar to both. So they're what we call a monocot, which means that the seed only has one part. So the coconut is a big seed. You can't split it in half. So like a dicot would have two parts, like a lima bean. You can kind of split them into two halves.
Right.
So most of our grasses and stuff are monocots, and bananas and corn and a lot of other things. So they never grow like wood, like a tree does. They're kind of spongy. The way that they're organized is different, but they're not growing in like bundles of leaves exactly like a grass does. So they kind of split the difference sometimes. Like if you took like an oak tree and you took the grass in your front yard and you put them together, it's not okay. There's at least one plant person out there like, stop saying these. You're saying words and you gotta stop saying
chalkboard.
Oh, I'm killing someone right now. Some botanist is like screaming. But they share characteristics of what we would call a tree because they're upright, they're dense, they are perennial plants, they live a long time. But then they have some characteristics to other monocots as well.
It's interesting. As you're saying that, I'm looking to the side because about a foot to the left of my screen is a window that leads to my front yard, in which I'm looking at about 4 palm trees, like right. Yeah. Like looking at palm trees as you're describing this. And so I live in Florida where we have many, many palm trees, but evidently they're not from here. They were introduced for the vibe.
Yeah, just for funsies.
Just for the aesthetic.
It's funny because coconut palms and some other palms, but coconut palms specifically will end up weird places because coconuts float. So they're migratory. So that's another reason that coconuts are mammals, right? They have milk, they're covered in hair, and they migrate.
They migrate.
There you go.
That's all it takes, actually.
Yeah, that's all it takes to be a mammal.
Taxonomists don't want you to know this one weird trick.
I'm going to get canceled by so many scientists for this one. But yeah, no. So
biologists hate him.
Probably for good reason. To be fair, you're right. So it's an interesting plant for sure, and they don't come from eggs. But I guess I can kind of see it. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I guess them floating explains how you get Executor on the islands of Alola, which are way out there. So you get the same Pokemon as on the mainland. It's just all the way out in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, same kind of thing. It makes sense.
Yeah, there we go.
Something. Sure.
So aside from Executor, the coconut tree, there's another really cool. There's plenty of Pokemon that are kind of like tree inspired, but a lot of them are just kind of like general tree, like I couldn't really find one particular real world like plant that they were based on. But there's one in particular that I love, this Pokemon, Tropius. Tropius is a Pokemon from the 3rd generation, so Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, which were like the most formative generations for me, because that was right when I was at the perfect age to be completely zeroed in on Pokemon. Like, I had played Gold and Silver and Crystal, and I was pretty into them. But by Gen 3, I was old enough to really get it. Like, I was old enough to start being good at it, right?
Yeah.
I didn't just have like a team of like every fire type I could get my hands on. I finally actually had an understanding of how to like build a team and progress and actually get better at the game. So Gen 3 had Tropius, which is still one of my favorites. It is, if a dinosaur, so a sauropod, right? One of those dinosaurs that has the long neck and the long tail and the four legs, so Littlefoot from Land Before Time. If a sauropod was cosplaying as a banana tree. So it has, like, its body is brown, and then it has these underneath its chin, it has like a bunch of bananas, of bright yellow bananas underneath its chin, and it has giant wings that are shaped like the leaves of a banana tree, which is kind of an odd choice.
Sure.
But I could see where they were going, right? Like, the leaves of the banana tree do look kind of like they would make a cool like wings for something.
Yeah.
I don't know why they decided to put that on a dinosaur. I'm glad they did, though. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm looking at pictures of it, and it has like four wings, kind of like a dragonfly.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a picture I'm looking at of it in the air, like it's supposedly flying, and it's like fat little legs are like curled up, and it's like they took a blimp, put bananas on it.
It's delightful. I love this Pokemon. Every time I play back through a Gen 3 game, I make sure I pick up a Tropius on my way through. I have like the perfect like image in my head. I could draw it of the route where you find Tropius.
Oh, that's cool.
I was really obsessed with those games. But so the reason I wanted to talk about Tropius is that Tropius has these bananas under its chin. They are very much the modern bright yellow banana that we eat, that you could go to the store and pick up. But my understanding is that is not how bananas naturally occur.
Yes, bananas in their natural form are really upsetting, because they're full of seeds, and the seeds are like the size of coffee beans. And so I'll have to post some pictures when I post this episode. But so like wild type bananas have lots of seeds. They're usually smaller. They usually don't really get bright yellow. They'll turn yellowy brown, sort of. And the animals that eat them don't care. They're still sweet smelling. They still like have a sweet flavor, but they're not like the banana, big, your curved yellow fruit we know and love, for sure.
Right. But we've made them this way.
we have in selection over thousands of years for, okay, I don't want to eat this banana with seeds. I'm going to pick the banana with the least seeds, and, so on and so forth. And eventually we started just asexually propagating our bananas. So everything's cloned. They're all clones of one another. And we've run into some problems with that. In the 50s, there was early 1900s through about the 50s, there was kind of the main banana on the market was called a Gros Michel, which translates to Big Mike, the Big Mike banana. And I don't know why, but that's what it was. And
is this French? Like Gros?
Yes, yeah.
That means fat.
Fat Mike is even better. That is even better.
Fat Mike.
Fat Mike banana. So dibs, if I ever like patent a banana, I'm not going to go with Gros Michel. It'll be Fat Mike.
That's a Fat Mike right there.
That's so funny.
My next podcast is going to be called Fat Mike.
Fat Mike.
But like it's MIC, like a microphone.
I dig it. Can your logo be like a banana that's a microphone? Anyway. So they were the big banana on the market. And then a disease called Panama disease, which is a fusarium, came through and wiped them all out. They were all clones of one another. So all their genetics were the same. So if one's susceptible, all the rest of them are too. And so now the banana that we know, and they looked a little bit different. They were a little bit straighter, sort of thicker and less yellow than the bananas we see today, which is the Cavendish banana. And it was bred to be resistant to Panama disease. There are some new strains of fusarium that we think are probably going to affect the Cavendish banana. In fact, Fernando Garcia, Dr. Banana Man on Twitter, researches this. That's his thing. And so the modern banana is very much not what you would find in nature.
I wonder, maybe this is something that has been explored in perhaps the anime that I haven't, since I don't watch it. Maybe I didn't pick up on this, but I wonder if there is some lore surrounding Tropius that mirrors like the human intervention on like breeding bananas.
I would be interesting to see that. I see in your notes that the Pokédex, whatever, the thing that tells you about Pokemon, that the bananas are edible.
Yes.
Its chin bananas are edible.
Yeah, I guess. And I think this is, I believe, depicted in the anime of that people will just grab a banana right off of Tropius's face and eat it. And, this is something cool that they can do in the Pokemon world, right? Because they can just make up whatever, is that it's not, harmful to Tropius. It's totally fine. You can just grab it and it's not a big deal. So I think this is interesting, like exploration of the getting using Pokemon as a food source without harming them, because there's a lot of discussion about whether humans in the Pokemon universe eat the Pokemon. I mean, they must, right?
I would think so. I would think so, because they eat meat in the cartoon, and they they got to get it, unless there's just regular cows somewhere that they're just not telling anyone about.
That's the big question, is where's the food coming from? But so I think Tropius is an interesting example of them trying to navigate using Pokemon as a food source, but without it harming the Pokemon. It's interesting that they would even introduce that concept.
Yeah, and what's funny is as I was reading this, I was like, that's so weird. And then as we're talking about it, I'm like, no, it's not that weird, because
weird.
We milk cows and we shear sheep, and we get benefits from the animals in our world and livestock in our world.
I don't think it's weirder than eating honey.
It's not.
It's not weirder than eating honey.
It's very much not.
If there was an animal that grew bananas out of its head and you could pluck them without harming the animal,
I would do it.
I would eat that banana.
I'd eat his face bananas, whatever.
I totally would.
It's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to try to blast through these last two categories because I know we're coming up on time, but there are a couple cool Pokemon I want to talk about. First up is flower Pokemon. We've got Hoppip, Skiploom, and Jumpluff, which I got to admit, I thought it was based on cotton. And I was thinking about this because there's a lot of Pokemon that are based on cotton. Actually, one of my favorites, Whimsicott, is a fairy and grass type. It's really super cute. There's not a lot to say about it other than it's based on a little cotton puff, and it's really cute. But Hoppip, Skiploom, and Jumpluff is based on the life cycle of a dandelion. So little Hoppip has those jagged little leaves on top of its head that look like the little zigzaggy leaves of a dandelion. Skiploom, the next evolution, has a really cute yellow flower on top of its head. And then finally it evolves into Jumpluff, which has these big, poofy, cottony, balls on its head and arms that look like the whimsical, form of the dandelion when it's puffy and it's got the seeds. And I don't really have a lot of understanding about the dandelion life cycle. Is it the same flower that goes from the yellow to the poofs?
Yeah, so dandelions are perennial plants. They have deep taproots, so they come back year after year, and those bright little yellow flowers are all connected. So it's a composite flower. So each one of the petals on it is kind of its own individual flower that are all kind of crammed together onto the same face. So as that plant develops, it's pollinated, fertilized, all of that. What you're seeing, the fluffy things, are actually the fruits of the dandelion. So
every time I talk to you, I find out something weird about fruit.
It's so weird. I know
that's always something weird with fruit.
That's kind of my thing, apparently, and I'm sulling out to it. I'm the weird fruit facts guy.
It's all fruit. It's all fruit all the way down.
It's fruit all the way down. So yeah, they're called I think they're achenes. So it's similar in structure like a sunflower seed. And they're not really eaten by anything. the fruits themselves. So they put on these little fluffy structures and they're carried by the wind. So just like our tumbleweed that we talked about earlier is sort of wind dispersed at a, macro scale, like the whole thing just takes off and rolls away. Dandelions, since they're a perennial plant, they stay put. They let the wind carry off the fruits and the seeds on these little parachute things.
How funny is it for them that they like evolved this mechanism to be completely like dispersed independently of animals? Like, okay, we don't need animals to disperse this anymore. And then human children just happen to see that and be like, oh, this is great. I'm going to blow all of the seeds out. And they're like, the dandelions are like, this is perfect.
Thank you. So I think about that stuff a lot. And this episode's going to be a little long and I don't even care because this is fun. I think about that a lot, how plants like develop things for some reason in particular, like peppers have capsaicic acid to kill insects and drive predators away. And people are just like, I'm going to put this on my hamburger.
Like humans come across like whatever weird mechanism they've developed to help themselves thrive. And humans come across it, they're like, this is great.
I love this. Caffeine is the same thing. It's an insecticide in caffeinated plants, or plants have caffeine in them, and we're just like, this makes me go fast in the morning.
I love this. This is awesome.
And the plants are just like, what's happening to us?
The plants are
what's
like,
wrong with these people?
Yeah, it's awesome, but it's not for you.
Yeah, stop it. Stop it.
It's like, I'm doing this for me. This is my thing. But I thought it was cute. I like the little dandelion Pokemon. So another flower Pokemon that I wanted to touch on is Cherrim, especially because of its appearance in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Cherrim is a little cherry blossom Pokemon. So it has these two forms. Has the overcast form where it's kind of its normal form that it's normally in. It's like cloaked in these dark purple petals. So it looks like this dark purple sort of bell shape. Mm-hmm. And then in sunny weather, it opens up and it reveals a really cute little smiling face surrounded by these bright pink petals that look like cherry blossoms, which are very, common. They're very like iconic plants, especially for Japan. Cherry blossoms are a big thing, in Japanese symbolism. And the reason I say particularly because of its appearance in Legends Arceus is that until maybe like a week or so after the game release, there was a bug in the game that made it to where if Cherrim opened up into its sunshine form, for whatever reason, it was uncatchable.
Wow.
So, and that wasn't like, that was a bug. It was a mistake in the game. And so people were posting all over Twitter about like, I just wasted every Pokeball I've got in my inventory. I used every Ultra Ball I've got. I just used every Pokeball I had and I could not catch this Cherrim. And so everyone's like, oh my God, I can't catch this Cherrim either. What's going on? Why has anybody caught a Cherrim like in this form? And eventually they put a patch through and they fixed it. But you could not catch Cherrim in its sunshine form, which was a little bit funny.
I'm sure super frustrating for a lot of people, though.
Yeah, certainly. But
what is wrong with this thing?
So I thought that was interesting. Like Pokemon does some cool things where in the game it really plays with the mechanic of weather. Weather has some different effects on different Pokemon. There's other Pokemon that change form based on the weather. So cast form is one that comes up a lot where it, like if it's sunny, it turns into a little fire, like a little sun. If it's rainy, it turns into a raindrop. But Cherrim is based on a plant, based on the flower, which I don't know if cherry blossoms in particular, but I think they do, because I know that around, is it in the springtime in Washington, D.C., all of the cherry blossom trees like bloom and it's very beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is pretty interesting, and they don't necessarily open and close or change forms like this, but it is sunlight that triggers, the opening of a lot of these blossoms. But what's interesting is a lot of plants do go through these what we call nastic movements. So there's different ways that plants like move, sort of. And some people think of tropism is another form of plant movement where they're going to turn and move towards the sun, and that's usually overblown a little bit, but it's a thing that happens, or they grow in response to an environmental condition. Nastism nastic movements are non-directional, so they respond to stimuli. So that would be like a flower closing at night. We would call that nyctinasty. where they close at nighttime. And then they open in the day or vice versa.
What's the flower that does that? The moon?
There's a moonflower and 2 or 3 others, actually. So
Morning Glory. Is Morning Glory one of those that
Yep.
closes up at night?
They'll close up at night, and then as soon as the sun comes up, they'll open. And part of that is for pollination, right? The pollinators are most active during the day, and so they're going to produce nectar during the day, and they don't really want to do any of that at night. So they close up. It helps protect the flower. And then there's some that do the opposite. So some flowers that are, say, pollinated by bats or moths or other insects that are active at night will close up during the day, and then they'll open up at night. And a lot of times they'll have this bright white flower that's really visible in moonlight to a number of insects and animals.
Oh, that makes sense, because they would want it to be, I guess that's a different set of light entirely that you need to really be focusing on if you're open at night.
So there are several flowers that are pollinated primarily by bats. And, bats are not as blind as people say they are.
They're not.
They probably, I don't know exactly, but, maybe see as well as we do, which in the grand scheme of things is not super great. Like, we both wear glasses. Now I'm thinking about a bat in glasses, and it's kind of adorable. But so they have these, like, a lot of bat pollinated plants have big, bright white flowers that'll catch and throw a lot of moonlight, and they smell like ripe fruit. They'll have a really almost sickly sweet odor, because that's what a lot of these bats are after. They're after fruit.
Yeah.
So they'll go find the flower.
That's really interesting. Like, I like the way that the Pokemon game plays with weather effects and, plays with that sort of, you can see elements from the real world, from nature in the real world, and how that actually plays out in the game by Cherim switching forms based on how the weather is.
Yeah, and there's something I actually meant to mention earlier that still fits here pretty well. And the way that flower, you asked earlier if plants will move to attract a pollinator, and not exactly, but there are flowers that can hear bees. It's weird. I know it sounds weird, but they can actually sense the vibrations from the wings of bumblebees and honeybees before they land on the flower.
Oh, wow.
If they're just buzzing around, just the air vibrations will trigger a response in the plant to start producing nectar. And depending on the type of bee that's about to land, some flowers can produce different concentrations of sugar in the nectar and things like that. Because some bees, like bumblebees, have really, really sugary nectar, and bumblebees will land on flowers and vibrate their wings in a specific way to get them to release pollen and things like that. So some of these relationships are so incredibly complicated, and there's a lot of communication going on that we have no idea.
That's if you go to the same coffee shop frequently enough, eventually the barista gets to where they see your car pulling in the parking lot, and they start fixing your order.
They just start making
so that when you walk in the door, your drink is on the counter ready to go.
That is exactly right. I love that.
It's very cute.
The bees are regulars.
Oh yeah, they're like, this guy. He's cool. So the last category of grass type Pokemon I want to talk about are grass types, and yet they are based on things which look like plants but aren't. They're not. They're fake plants.
Fake plants.
Yes. So the first one is, I guess I should do these in generation order. The first one is Lileep and Cradily, which were the fossil Pokemon from Gen 3. In a lot of the Pokemon games, you'll find these fossils, and at first they're just an item that you have, but then at some point in the game, you'll be able to process them in a way where they extract the DNA from it and make a Pokemon out of it. So in Gen 3, it was Anorith and I think Armaldo that were Pokemon based on Anomalocaris.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then the other ones were Lileep and Cradily, which were based on sea lilies, which I had not really heard of. But I was thinking about them. So they're called I mentioned the Pokedex will have flavor text where it says the such and such Pokemon. They're called the sea lily Pokemon. Their sea lilies are not lilies. they're not plants at all.
Oh.
They're actually these types of echinoderms called crinoids. So echinoderms are like sea stars and sea urchins. So that's kind of what they're related to. And crinoids are interesting because they have these like feathery arms, like tentacles with these sort of frills on them. And then they're kind of all attached to like a body that's on a stalk. So it does kind of look like a flower because it's on a stalk that looks like a stem. And then it's got this body that looks like, petals coming out of, the middle part of a flower. And it's attached to the seafloor or like rocks or coral or whatever kind of substrate they're situated on. And so it looks like a flower growing out of, the seafloor, but it's this little animal called a crinoid. And they come from fossil Pokemon in the game. But it's worth noting that crinoids are not extinct.
Very real. We're still here, guys.
They're still here. But I think in more recent games, you can find Lilip and Cradily just like out and about. Like I think in Legends Arceus, you can come across them like in lakes and stuff. So I think that kind of messes up the timeline. That like the fossil Pokemon are now just like there.
Yeah, they're just hanging out.
Yeah, but yeah, they look like plants and they're grass types in the game. I think they're like rock and grass type, which is interesting, but not based on plants at all.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting, weird. I don't have a ton to say about crinoids because I don't really get them that much. Obviously, like I mentioned, like I literally thought they were plants until yesterday. So the other fake plant Pokemon I want to talk about is Lurantis, which was a Gen 7 Pokemon. Famously, in Gen 7, there was the equivalent of gym leaders in that generation, which were like, I don't remember what they were called, like trial captains or whatever. One of them had a Lurantis that was like really, really, really difficult to beat. So I get kind of flashbacks when I see Lurantis. I'm like, so Lurantis is based on the orchid mantis, which are these really, really cool, beautiful, ethereal looking mantises, like a praying mantis. They're like related to praying mantises. Well, I guess they are a type of praying mantis. Yeah, they're related to the green European praying mantis you've probably seen. And the orchid mantis mimics orchid petals in a really beautiful way. They're usually like white and pink and kind of frilly looking. They're
so cool.
Yeah. Cool. Have you seen them?
I have. I haven't seen one in person. Again, there's a lot of things that I would like to meet in person, but I haven't. But they're beautiful.
Yeah, you were talking about orchids a little while ago. I've heard that there's kind of a back and forth between orchids and mantises and that they kind of play off of each other in interesting ways.
Yeah, I think that orchids are such a diverse kind of family of plants that their flowers are really strange and really unique. And they do have these interesting like coevolutionary relationships with mantids and bees and pollinators. There's some that the anthers that contain the pollen on the orchid look just like bees. And so bees will come land on them and like interact with them and then pick up pollen. And, there's some that look like little people. And there's one called the monkey face orchid. And it's called that. I'll send you a picture because it looks like a monkey's face. It's really unsettling.
Yeah. It's a little bit like I know that humans have a tendency to look for patterns.
Yeah.
And look for familiar patterns, right? So like we'll look for something that looks like a primate face. So like we're familiar with primate faces and we have a tendency to want to find primate faces everywhere we look. But that one feels like it's like this can't be a coincidence, can it?
Like, man, you're doing this on purpose. You're trying to freak me out.
I wonder if it's like a protective thing where they're like, oh, humans won't eat something that kind of looks like a human.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. And I guess it is probably just us, like, what's that called? Pareidolia, where we look for faces and things. But yeah, you're right. That one is like too close. It's like too real. Too real, bro.
Well, you start like side-eyeing them, like, are you watching me?
Just looking back at you like, quit staring at me. I don't know. It's weird.
But so Lurantis is interesting because it's very visually based on the orchid mantis. And I'm sure also, based on actual orchids. But Lurantis is pure grass type and not a bug type, which is really weird because they have the bug type. there are bug type Pokemon for Pokemon that are based on bugs.
Yeah.
But they just like chose not to use the bug type for Lurantis. I don't know why, because it's pretty obvious based on the way that they look. You know, they've got like the bug-shaped head. They've got the kind of like raptorial, like, you know, appendages, I suppose. Inexplicable. I don't know.
I as we've talked through this whole thing, and that was kind of our last one, so we'll start wrapping up. But I would like to be in a pitch meeting sometime at Nintendo as they're developing some of these things. Like some guys just like, hey, what if it had face bananas? And they're like, brilliant, you get a raise.
I do feel like, you know, the early generations were clearly, they were trying stuff out. Like they were really like, what direction do we want to go with this? Where they were like, this one's going to be a pile of goo. And that's it. It doesn't have any, it's not a thing. It's just a pile of goo.
That's its whole deal.
And this one, when it evolves, there's just more of it. Like there
it's
are
a bigger pile of goo.
There are like multiple Pokemon where their evolved form is just like a bunch of them.
That's so funny.
Like Diglett evolves in a Dugtrio. It's just like there's 3 of them now. Oh no. So, but you can see like as they get through the generations, they start to really incorporate some interesting real world biology concepts like photonastic responses and mimicry between, you know, animals and plants. And just I feel like there's some really cool stuff going on. You can actually like learn stuff about the real world through like playing Pokemon. It can be kind of difficult to sometimes parse like, okay, what of this is stuff they made up for the Pokemon world and what comes from the real world. But I feel like if you're interested enough to like start digging in and be like, I wonder what that's based on. Maybe I'll look this up. And then you start to learn a little bit more about like, oh, well, this is from the real world. Like, I think it's a great, welcome mat almost. It's like a great front door into learning about nature.
For sure. Anything that gets kids and people asking the questions, you know, if it inspires you to do a Google search about, I wonder what this comes from. It's great. It's great.
I think Pokemon Go is the gateway app into iNaturalist.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, what if I collected real plants?
I'll do this for real plants. I'll build my real life Pokedex.
So funny.
Yeah.
Well, that was a lot of fun. Like, I really enjoyed that. Why don't you plug your stuff one more time before we wrap up? Where can we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm over at Just the Zoo of Us, which is our podcast that you can find pretty much wherever. Our website, justthezooofus.com. That will point you to, you know, if you don't know where to start, we got a lot of episodes. So it'll give you a little rundown of like good places to start. You can, of course, start with Vikram's episode on plants, which I believe was episode 101.
I think that's right.
So, you know, you can start there, start with plants and let that be your gateway into, I'm not going to try to recruit people to jump ship and desert and join the animal faction.
It can be both. Yeah, it can be both.
We actually don't usually we'll like mention Pokemon in our episodes. We haven't really leaned fully into doing a Pokemon episode yet, but I was also a guest on this podcast called Creature Feature that is about animals, where I actually did kind of get to really lean into Pokemon based on animals. And get to really like I did like Garchomp and Marini and what was the other one? Flygon. So
that's fun.
Yeah. So like if you really like that sort of like exploring the real world animal science and stuff that goes into Pokemon, that was a really fun time. So check out my episode over on Creature Feature. Yeah, I usually talk about animals, but it's really fun to talk about plants too, because like you said, there's a lot of intersections between them and like learning how they interact with each other is always really, really cool.
For sure. And I'll link all that in the comments.
Thank you.
In the comments. Whatever.
Like
you know
and subscribe.
What I mean. Like and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button.
Hit that bell. Get notifications.
Oh man, the internet's ruined me. Ellen, it was fun as always.
Of course, absolutely. It's been a delight. You can't get rid of me.
I don't want to. I'm trying hard not to.
You're stuck with me now.
I'm cool with that. Y'all, thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this as always, and we will see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Hey, so was that the most fun you've ever had listening to a podcast? It was maybe the most fun I've ever had recording an episode of a podcast. Y'all, I know that was a long one, and I appreciate you sticking with it, and you're welcome. Make sure to look up Ellen Weatherford, all the places. She is at Just the Zoo of Us, pretty much everywhere on social media. She's really great, and it's a show you should be listening to. It's lots of fun. Thanks so much to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science and to Forest Proud for sponsoring and supporting the show. This would not be possible without y'all. But really, thank you most to you, the listener. You know how much I enjoy doing this for you, and it's the interaction, it's everything else that comes along with it that really makes this a complete joy in my life, an absolute joy in my life. Like I said earlier, there's big stuff in store for Planthropology this March. I want you to be involved. I want you to just take part in all the fun. Share this with a friend, rate, review, all the things. And y'all, it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good month. So get excited about the content coming up. Lots of tree stuff, lots of plant stuff, and lots of nerdy goodness. Y'all keep being really cool plant people. Keep being kind to each other. And if you haven't been kind to each other so far, maybe start doing the thing. You know I love you, and I'll talk to you next week.